But let's start out by reminding our audience your story and your interest in health, which I think is amazing. When I was reading some of these things in your introduction, the health issues that you had to deal with, allergies, asthma, poor digestion, brain fog, low energy levels, joint pain. Like it sounds like I'm describing a 55-year-old. You know what I mean? Like you were very, very young when you were experiencing these things. So can you tell us about your journey through health?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because when these things are listed out, I actually realize how poor my health was. I didn't actually it wasn't a thing for me when I was growing up that I felt unhealthy or it was a huge issue. But I was basically born with asthma. And this was really hard on my parents who didn't know what was going on, why I had these breathing issues. Of course, they gave me antibiotics straight away. They thought it was, bronchitis and other things, but it turned out to be an autoimmune condition called asthma. And then when I was around, a bit old, like around 10, going on 15, I had a lot of allergies to a lot of different things, pollen, dust mites, and I just always I remember being a teenager with a red stuffy nose all the time. Just this actually I do remember as something that sort of was really annoying, especially when you're a teenager and you're very preoccupied about how you look and how you come across to girls. And this was something that was really annoying, and that was one of the things that totally disappeared with diet. So that was a big improvement for me. And yes, I do think that it affected my mood. I do think it affected my energy levels. It affected quite a lot of things. And sometimes you don't realize how much your diet and other lifestyle factors can make you feel poorly, but we get used to it. It's also a defensive mechanism, right? We don't want to feel too bad when things aren't going well. But once you can achieve a better state of health, you sort of look back on it and realize, wow, I really wasn't anywhere close to what I can be, how healthy I can be. And diet has been the biggest change in my life. But there's a lot of other things I do. I really pay attention to my sleep. I pay attention to what stresses me out. I'm very active. I always try to get a lot of sunshine, fresh air. So there's a whole host of things that I do. But diet really was the biggest one for me, especially reducing carbohydrates and removing the really bad seed oils.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I agree with you. I work with people on all kinds of things like that, all kinds of lifestyle factors. And I think people have different kind of levers that really make the biggest difference in the beginning. But certainly in my experience, it has been mostly that nutrition is the biggest one, that if we can get that one right, it seems like more and more people are able to get some of the other things right. And those other things kind of come along. Down the path when somebody's ready, because they're feeling good, right? Like you start eating good, like you said, and you start feeling so much better, it's easier to want to get wins in other categories. You were very active growing up as well. I believe you said you were a soccer player, and some of these things must have really impacted playing soccer for you.
Yeah, I loved soccer until I was probably 14, 15 years old. I wanted to be a professional soccer player, but I actually had to stop playing soccer at a crucial point because I had this condition that affects quite a few teenagers. Actually, it's not something a lot of people have heard about, but it's called Osgood-Schlatter's. It's a difficult German name to pronounce, and it has to do with the cartilage and bones in the heel of the foot that don't form properly. So it's just painful to walk around, and you certainly don't want to be running on a pitch when you have that. So it basically took me out of the soccer game for maybe a year or two. And this is the crucial age where you have to demonstrate your skill and start, being interesting to bigger clubs. So that point, my dream was shattered. But thankfully, I went on to do something that I'm even more passionate about, which is health and science.
Do you think if you didn't have that year or two gap that you would have been able to get onto the national team and make a difference against Argentina in the World Cup last year?
Well, one can always dream. Statistically, no. I would certainly not bet on myself, but I think I could have achieved a reasonable professional level. But I mean, after that, who knows? I don't probably could have made a small living for a couple of years, but I don't think I would have, been one of those guys who can retire when they're 25. They've made so much money.
Yeah, sure. Gotcha. Okay, so you mentioned low carbohydrate. How was it that you were able to find low carbohydrate diets? Who introduced you to that?
It was Gary Taubes, like had been the case for so many people. I read his book when I was at university. At the time, I was studying Italian and management studies, so language and a business course, and I was not interested in either of the things that I was doing. So I was looking for other stuff to read, and I was reading a lot of physics, history of science, and I don't remember exactly how, but I came across Gary Taubes' book. The first time I read it, I put it down after a couple pages because it was dense and I didn't really get it. And for whatever reason, I picked it up a couple months later, and then I just couldn't put it down again. And he was going through this whole history of how we came to believe what we believe nowadays with regards to diet. And this sort of historical perspective, I think, is sorely lacking in a lot of modern scientific discussions, a lot of scientific minds, and people aren't aware of why they believe what they believe. And I think that's such a valuable thing to be able to learn. And this is why I appreciate Gary Taubes so much. He brought this historical scientific perspective, and he allowed me to gain perspective on the field that I was about to embark on. And if it wasn't for his book, I wouldn't have the career I have today. I wouldn't have the interests I have today. I wouldn't even have many of the friends I have today that I made, by going into this field and meeting all these people. So he was really the trigger for me. And his main recommendation was to lower carbohydrates. So I think the first thing I did was cut out bread. I wasn't a huge, I didn't consume sodas really. Maybe some orange juice. So I guess that's pretty much the same thing. But I cut out basically bread, pasta, croissants, all that stuff. That made a huge difference. And of course, I also happened to cut out the fried foods, which contained bad oils. I just didn't know that that's what I was doing back then. And that was the biggest step for me. I think it allowed me to. I was never, overweight. No one would have looked at me and say you're overweight, but I was certainly carrying very small love handles, and I was skinny. I had no muscle on me back then. So it sort of highlighted that, yeah, you're not overweight, but you're also not in very good shape. And then my interest in exercise grew out of that. I think out of some vanity and out of the fact that I was always very active as a kid. I was, cliff diving, hiking, bicycling, doing all those things. And I had sort of stopped when I went to university. And once diet got me back into shape, like we were saying before we started recording, then this other stuff, this willingness to exercise, this extra energy that I was given, basically launched me into gymnastics, weightlifting, CrossFit, hiking, running, all that stuff. So now I do a lot of trail running. I do CrossFit maybe 3 to 5 times a week, which is a mix of many different things, hiking whenever I can. So I'm very active, and I couldn't imagine not doing that. It's just, I have this impulse to exercise, and it's something I wish more people had, because I don't feel like I'm disciplined. A lot of people would say that, oh, you're so disciplined, you do this every day, you work out hard. But it's really something I naturally want to do. It's very interesting to me that that's kind of how it works. I think people who go to the gym, they're not healthy because they go to the gym, they're healthy and thus they go to the gym. That's my view of it.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's wonderful. What a cool feeling to actually get, rid of some of these health issues that you were suffering from. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people don't know how good they could feel. It really is self-correcting. It'll make you want to stay on the diet because you just feel so good. So you described tons of different activities. You're very busy, lots of physical activity. What does your diet look like today? Do you follow any certain kind of like particular diet, or what things are you eating today?
Yeah, so my diet is pretty simple. It's mostly carnivore with dairy. And the reason why is because, so after I made these changes to my diet, which was just lowering the carbohydrate intake, and I would eat meat, eggs, fish, lots of vegetables, fruit, nuts, basically what you would call a paleo diet, and that most people would think is very healthy. Cooking with olive oil, butter, all that stuff. But at some point around maybe when I was 25 years old, I just could not digest leafy greens, anything that was fiber. So nuts, leafy greens, even some fruit, basically would go out the way it came in. So ulcerative colitis is when your colon is inflamed and you can't digest fibrous matter. It basically doesn't stay there to ferment, to be transformed into short chain fatty acids and get absorbed. That wasn't happening for me. I have no idea why. It's a bit of a mystery, but it tends to happen in males, and it tends to happen around their mid-20s, which is what happened to me. I never got an official diagnosis because the gastroenterologists I saw were pretty useless, if I'm being honest. So I had to sort of figure it out myself. And I came to this diagnosis, which I also confirmed with biopsies. So I asked for an endoscopy and a colonoscopy to try to actually have some empirical evidence of what was going on in my digestive system. And, coupled to the symptoms and those biopsies, I figured out, okay, you probably have ulcerative colitis. There are different sort of subtleties to what it could be, but that's basically it. It's another autoimmune condition. And if you already have one autoimmune condition, you're more likely to develop a second one. So in my case, I had asthma, and then I developed this digestive condition, which is considered autoimmune. So that also sort of makes sense. So I triangulated this diagnosis, and then it was very simple. I figured out, well, I'm not going to eat something that I can't digest that makes me feel also bloated. And so I just started cutting out plants. I actually love vegetables. I still love vegetables. I like the taste. I love cooking them. I really do enjoy it, but they don't like me. The plants don't like me that much. So, but I'm fine. I actually don't feel very restricted, if I'm being honest. People think it's a nightmare to have to eat like that, but I mean, 99% of the time when I go out to a restaurant or to a supermarket, at least where I live in France, and when I'm in Portugal as well, traveling for work, I always find something that's totally fine. I'll just ignore the greens on the side of the plate, have the steak or the fish or the eggs, and I'm good. I don't feel like I'm deprived. I'll have little pieces of fruit here and there that are, not too rich in fiber. And I'll have honey as well. Honey, of course, is just basically sugar. So that is fine for me in the amounts that I eat it. So I have dairy now, some honey. I also have some chocolate because it's mostly fat, even though it has fiber. So I can do chocolate fine. And yeah, it's basically lots of steaks, some fish, some salmon, some mackerel, not some shellfish, because I have I'm supposed to still have an anaphylactic IgE type allergy. So this sort of allergy where your throat closes up if you have shellfish. So I developed that when I was maybe 12. And I say maybe because I've been very good. I've managed to avoid shellfish my whole life, except this one time in my late 20s where I ate some seafood at a restaurant by mistake. And I thought, oh my God, I have to go to the hospital. I'm going to die. My friend drives me there in a rush. I'm expecting any moment now, my throat is going to close, and nothing happened. So the question I asked myself was like, okay, you're supposed to have gone into shock basically, but nothing happened. So are you still allergic? The only way you can find out, you can't do the skin prick test or with a blood test. You just have to eat the food and see if you react. And you need to do that in a hospital setting. So I've still yet to set up my dinner date with the doctor at the hospital and have some shrimp and see if I make it basically. So that's on my to-do list this year.